On Monday, November 4, 2016, Dick Conaway and I drove from Longmont, Colorado to the Pawnee National Grasslands and Pawnee Buttes, located on the northeast plains of Colorado. Grover, Keota, Raymer, and Briggsdale are the nearest small settlements. Alt on Highway 14 is the closest town with gas and stores. The Pawnee National Grassland was transferred to the Forest Service from the Soil Conservation Service in 1954. The Soil Conservation Service acquired this prairie during the Dust Bowl days of the 1930s and was charged with its rehabilitation. It was designated Pawnee National Grassland in 1960. Pawnee National Grassland is one of 19 throughout the nation, one each in Oregon and Idaho, and the rest are scattered from Texas to North Dakota. 12 Minuteman missile silos, approximately 2 acres each in size, are located on the grassland. Public access is not permitted. The buttes are sedimentary rock formations, 1/2 mile apart, rising 350 feet above the plains to an elevation of 5,375 feet. When you visit, bring plenty of water and a full tank of gas. During the early stages of American expansion, the high plains of northeastern Colorado were prime grazing land for large populations of deer, antelope, elk, and buffalo. Human population consisted of Indians and a few fur trappers. Before 1850, a fur trader named Elbridge Gerry settled where Crow Creek joined the South Platte River east of present-day Greeley. Little is known about this early Coloradan and colorful frontier figure of Will County. He was a horse rancher and American Indian trader as of 1853 near the confluence of Crow Creek and the South Platte River, about 10 miles east of Greeley. He was also the grandson of a signer of the Declaration of Independence, Elbridge Gerry, for whom he was named. Prior to coming to Will County, he worked as a mountain man for the American Fur Company toward the end of the fur trade era. He wandered the Rockies trapping and trading until he settled near Fort Laramie and took a Sioux wife. He was renowned for his large Indian family and had amicable dealings with the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and his Sioux relatives throughout his early career. Soren Pawnee Buttes Nelson, his wife Christiana, and their family crossed the Atlantic on the ship John J. Boyd, arriving in New York on February 15, 1856. The obituary of their daughter, Tiani Thomas, says they crossed the plains with a handcart company in 1856. In 1861, John Wesley Iliff started his first cow camp on Crow Creek above Elbridge Gerry's place. In 1866, the Union Pacific Railroad announced it would soon be laying rails across southwestern Nebraska. Buffalo were killed by the thousands to feed the railroad construction crews and for their hides, which were in great demand in the east. The buffalo soon became scarce. In 1868, he bought $40,000 worth of cattle from Charles Goodnight and Oliver Loving, who trailed them north from Texas. The Goodnight-Loving Trail went through this area. Goodnight continued trailing herds for Iliff through 1876. By 1877, Iliff's domain stretched from the South Platte River north to the chalk bluffs of the Colorado-Wyoming border and from the mountains east to the present Kansas border. He was the biggest cattleman in Colorado. Between 1905 to 1910, rains returned to the grasslands and settlers migrated to the area in even greater numbers. Keota boomed, as did Grover and Briggsdale. Over 35% of the land was plowed, forcing most of the large stockmen out of the area. By this time, John Wesley Iliff had moved on to Texas. Nature at its worst struck in 1924, with cloudbursts, deep snows, high winds, tornadoes, hail, and lightning that burned the wheat. Keota had seen the last of its prosperous days. 1929 to 1937 was a violent time on the plains, with rustling, land jumping, and even murder. In the 1930s, the drought and winds returned. Winds of 50 to 60 miles an hour became common along the Front Range of the Rockies from Texas to the Canadian border, carrying away the dry topsoil. During 2 dust storms, the sun was almost blotted out in Washington, D.C., and Colorado dust fell on ships 300 miles out on the Atlantic. The farms were literally blown away, and the Dust Bowl area became a virtual desert. A Pawnee chief once said, "Grass no good, upside down." In 1937, Congress authorized the Soil Conservation Service to purchase submarginal farmland. 70 acres of meadow improvement began near Briggsdale, with the construction of 2 dams and 3 diversion ditches to spread the floodwater over the meadows and provide limited irrigation on other areas. Springs were developed and wells dug. Windmills were erected and catch basins constructed to collect as much runoff water as possible. The policy was no cow would have to go more than 3/4 of a mile for water. The plowed and denuded lands were planted to mostly crested wheatgrass, introduced from Russia and Siberia, which was well adapted to the climate for livestock and erosion control. Trees were planted to form windbreaks and provide habitat for wildlife. Within 2 years, the planted grasses revegetated the plowed areas, and grazing was allowed on a limited basis. Native grasses are slowly replacing the crested wheat and other grasses planted as a conservation measure. Sligo, Colorado, being named after a county in Ireland, was home to few people. The town peacefully rested along the Burlington Railroad that was shared by sister communities in which Sligo lies between Grover and Keota. Sligo never had a post office nor express office. The only record that reveal any existence of remains at present-day Sligo state that a cemetery lies near Grover on Barren Prairie. It has 35 graves. The earliest tombstone bursts are of Peter and Christina Hilser in 1844. The tombstone earliest death was Mark W. August Ball in 1888. The town of Sligo was a few miles west along the Burlington, Missouri Railroad. Nothing at all remains of the town. Our visit to the Pawnee National Grasslands and Pawnee Buttes was an interesting excursion.